My friends, those of you who have been following this channel for a while know that sometimes I have certain issues.
And you put the load right on it.
And unfortunately, that sometime is much of my life. I'm in the space again, in that space. So I had a pretty long video prepared. I cut out all the clips, and it went on and on for like an hour. So anyway, unfortunately, can't complete it now. So in order to fulfill my goal of making one video a month, I am doing this, which is a constructive criticism of Bret Weinstein, a measured and constructive criticism of a man who has the COVID answers. If you look into his eyes, there's a lot of science there, a lot of evolution. There's almost like evolution happening in his eyes. Everything is multiplying and changing with Bret Weinstein. He's just some sort of a really bright person. He's one of these people on the internet, you just say, wow. Like anything he says, like sometimes he says evolution. It's almost like he introduces it to me each and every time. Why do you need a vaccine, dude, if you could almost die and have better immunity? Bret Weinstein has the answers here.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Geert Vanden Bossche said this is going to become a pandemic of variants, and he talked about immune escape.
Vanden Bossche. Bro, there are a lot of things you can say about Vanden Bossche, but if you knew Geert Vanden Bossche back in the day, he had the answers.
Vanden Bossche.
He saw the variants. Perhaps they even spoke to him in tiny voices. It doesn't matter. I mean, it really doesn't matter, man. Different COVID schemers, COVID carpetbaggers, COVID commissars. They were on to Vanden Bossche from the start.
Vanden Bossche.
He saw the variants, man. He saw that escape. You know, how they all, like, escape out of it. Like in some, like, GTA game when you start shooting or something. Let's not...
Vanden Bossche.
So intense just to talk about this. And, like, especially when I hear, like, Vanden Bossche. I mean, I kind of tense up. I feel I need to say something. All of these schemers, all of this COVID clown car, the one thing they never said about Vanden Bossche is that he's a veterinarian. Vanden Bossche is not a veterinarian. Like, he's never treated a hamster, I guarantee you. Never treated a dog. He just sees the variants. Like, Vanden Bossche, like, there was no need to, like, get caught up with his accolades and even his name, Geert Vanden Bossche.
Vanden Bossche.
It's like Vanden Bossche is kind of like that dude who has your back. He's like, don't go with this girl, man. I know she seems receptive, but there are variants.
Vanden Bossche.
When you say Vanden Bossche, you really say it with respect. as a man who hasn't treated a parakeet or a lizard, who's definitely not a veterinarian. That's Vandenbush. Vandenbush isn't interested in animals, and nobody has even thrown something like that at him. Like, when you think Vandenbush, don't think the pet store.
Could you explain who he is, too?
Sure. He is a immunobiologist. His training is veterinary.
Hello, little Leonard. My name is Kurt Vandenbush, doctor. The one thing I don't believe in life is giving cats human names. Simply said, they never heard them. Today is the day we're gonna take your two furry variants, put them in a Ziploc bag, and toss them into the nothingness of life.
Vandenbush.
It would really piss me off if somebody came here and called their new kitten Vandenbush. It would make me very angry. I could put an explosive into their garbage container easily without being spotted. I'll tell you something else, Leonard. I don't know how to treat lizards. I kinda slept through that one. I had some altercation in my romantic life, and I never went back to these chapters about lizards. So if they bring in a lizard here, I don't know what the fuck is going on. If one looks rusty, I put it down forever and then build them. I just look up some shit on Wikipedia to explain what happened. Everybody's intellectually lazy. They'll spend so much on this lizard, and when it dies, it just goes away. Like everything.
Vandenbush.
Of course, Leonard, you're going to sleep now, but just for a little while. Dr. Vandenbush is in a good mood. You will wake up without your reproductive capacity, and you will never share our secrets because you're a cat. You don't have the cause and effect connection, and you don't understand human language except on a very basic Pavlovian level. Sleep well, Leonard. This is one thing that Vandenbush does well. This and human biology and immune science.
He has training in the relevant area of vaccination technology. He was a guest on Dark Horse. People can look up my discussion with him. Interestingly enough, just before coming on the Dark Horse podcast, Vandenbush was actually treating a dark horse. It was a big coincidence. It is, many people regard it as a very good way to understand what he's saying, because often he speaks about matters that are quite technical.
Today I would like to share my insights on how the different dynamics of the pandemic, of the COVID-19 pandemic in different parts of the world is ultimately going to lead to the same outcome. That is at least my view based on my scientific insights. So, as we all know, in some countries, the mass vaccination campaigns seem to be a very big success. So we know, for example, in countries like United Kingdom and Israel, infection rates have been going down quite dramatically. And this is seen as a success by health authorities
Vandenbush.
and stakeholders of these mass vaccination campaigns. Whereas in other countries, where to some extent vaccine coverage rates are maybe not similar, but pretty close, like for example in Chile, I think Chile vaccinated right now approximately 40% of the population, one dose, compared to the UK 50%. And there, on the contrary, the infectivity rates are going up. So that is a pretty stunning finding, observation.
Vandenbush.
And it's, I think, too often explained by authorities, being due to the lack of adherence to infection prevention measures.
In any case, what he argued was that the fact of these vaccines being very narrowly targeted, right? These vaccines contain a single subunit of a single protein, and they're being deployed in a way that is unusual. They're being deployed into an active pandemic, right? When we immunize against something like measles, the expectation is you will develop your full immunity with almost no chance of encountering measles, right? In this case, what we have are vaccines that are leaky, in which they do not provide full sterilizing immunity. They are narrow, and we are effectively creating an intense evolutionary pressure to cause the spike protein, of which this one subunit is what is contained, what the information for it is contained in the vaccines. We are putting intense evolutionary pressure on it to change so that the antibodies and other immune cell recognition mechanisms that are trained by the vaccines are incapable of finding the pathogen when it gets in. This is what causes a breakthrough case, is that the immunity that's been created is evaded by the pathogen, and if the pathogen changes, that is more likely.
Here's an update from the real world. This is the scientific consensus. You take it or you don't take it, but here it is. I'm interested in convincing nobody. But here's what sane people think. Here's what 90% of scientists think. So it's like the virus, it gets in and it multiplies, and it has then more opportunities for mutation if it multiplies. Now if a person has a vaccine and it doesn't get through to the person, then it has fewer opportunities to multiply. And if a person has a shot of a vaccine and the virus still breaks through, it's not as feisty in there. It's not as feisty. It doesn't get as feisty in there. The real kind of bottleneck is Brett is a douche. That's the real leaky bottleneck. The evolutionary bottleneck is that he's a douchebag. If fewer people get infected, then the virus has fewer opportunities to multiply and mutate. That's aspect one. And then also, like Vandenbush, maybe like looking at all the animals in the zoo, or maybe at his pet clinic, he just sees the variants. Hamsters have different colors. Imagine like you were a veterinarian like Vandenbush, and you just saw all the eyes of different animals like detached from their bodies.
Vandenbush.
But anyway, viruses multiply all the fucking time. So every pandemic happens to be a pandemic of variants. I know there are over 100 variants of this virus, and that's the case with all of them, because they fucking replicate themselves all the time. Vandenbush predicted nothing. He predicted nothing. There's nothing he can say, Vandenbush or Bret Weinstein, this idiot. There's nothing they can say predictive, which is what science is supposed to do. It's supposed to predict things. Like, they can't say, oh, look at Chile and look at UK and Israel, and this is Vandenbush, his theory. This is what's happening. They can do nothing. That's all they have predicted, is that somehow when fewer people get the virus, it's going to evolve more. That's basically what they predicted, and they can't do anything to it. This is not the dark horse. This is the taint horse we're talking about here. the taint horse of lies and pseudoscience.
And so what he said was, if you vaccinate into an active pandemic with vaccines like this, what you will get is a evolutionary pressure for a radiation of variants, an evolutionary radiation of different molecular signatures, changes in the spike protein, that will then cause the vaccines to be less and less effective at producing immunity, which is exactly what we see.
So he predicted this
Absolutely. He did predict it.
accurately.
Accurately predicted it.
All right, my friend. So since you're blessed with not watching this idiotic podcast with these two douchebags, let me reiterate. He predicted nothing. Variants always happen in pandemics because viruses replicate all the time. And a lot of these variants, they're not more deadly or less deadly. Some of them are less deadly, and only a few of them are horrible. And as far as I know, none of the horrible variants have emerged from countries with high vaccination rates.
Vandenbush.
If Vandenbush would have predicted something, then in countries with high vaccination rates and with low vaccination rates, the level of infections would be the same. COVID would find its sneaky way around the vaccinated people, but instead what happens is that vaccinated people don't give the virus as many opportunities to replicate itself. That would be the prediction, that it wouldn't matter if the country has high vaccination rates or not, the infection rate would stay the same. If anything that Vandenbush said had any kind of bearing on anything other than veterinary science, this would be the prediction. Let me just say what science is. Science is not about explaining things. Science is about predicting things. Like, let's say you have a horrible father and he beats you and you're a child. And every third Friday, he's really pissed off. And he comes home and he beats you. And you say, next third Friday, I'm going to get my ass whooped, right, by my dad. That's what's happening. If that's going to happen again and again, that's science. You predicted something. Now, explaining things is different. Because if you explain why your dad gets angry, that might be true or it might not be true. You could say, toward the middle of the week, he really gets pissed off. That might be true or it might not be true. The point is that to be science, it has to predict something and it has to be validated again and again and again. An explanation isn't science.
Vandenbush.
So people can explain why ivermectin is needed in your system, why your body's crying out for this horse medicine. They can explain it, but it has to be predictive of something. And the only evidence we have so far of ivermectin doing anything against COVID is when COVID was put in a petri dish with the level of ivermectin that would actually kill you. It would kill you, it would be toxic to humans. It died. But the amount there was fucking toxic. Who knows how many other toxic shit. You can put it in Clorox or whatever.
Vandenbush.
Who cares what number of toxic chemicals you can put COVID in and it's going to die? That's the only bit of evidence. Everything else has been recalled because it's bullshit science. My friends, this pandemic is not something I care about anymore. Honestly. So I just get worked up always because I don't like shooting videos.
Now, is every component of his model correct? That's a much harder question to answer. But what I would say is any time somebody succeeds in predicting better than the so-called experts, you want to know how they did it. And he was making absolute evolutionary sense, right? Vandenbush, his concerns were very well honed, and he was making sense, and then the world that he predicted emerged. And it is now incumbent on us to say, okay, have we learned anything from this, right? Do the vaccines need to be modified such that they don't produce this effect? There are conceivable ways you could do that.
Bret Weinstein, he looks into the eyes of Joe Rogan, this comedian that became successful for some reason on the internet, and says, hey, there are conceivable ways we can do it. We can make these vaccines better. Bret Weinstein is not that smart. he is YouTube smart for some people. As far as I know, he has like one scientific publication to his name. Like, he did get a nice diploma, no doubt about it, but he has like one paper he published in a mediocre journal, as far as I can say. My dad is a physicist, and I don't know, I think he's around 30 papers in English-speaking journals as a co-author, because that's how physics is. And so Brett Weinstein is really a nobody in science. He's a nobody. He contributed nothing. And whatever ways there are of making vaccines better, neither Bret Weinstein nor the veterinarian with a Nazi name, neither of them know what to do. They don't know what's going on right now. They're just making money off of it. I have to ride on this taint horse with Joe and Brett. I have to ride on this taint horse. And even if this video is very short, each moment of this ride is very painful. It's very painful. It's draining. It's painful.
Right? But if we don't do it, if we just say, well, more of the same, have a booster of the same thing, it's not going to solve the problem. So in effect, what I would say is these vaccines are a spectacular achievement, but they are a prototype, right? They have achieved something that had never been done before. Technologically, that's remarkable, but they were not ready for prime time.
What does it mean, not ready for prime time, Brett? What does it mean, you complete moron, not ready for prime time? Like, around 5 million people have died of this thing, and the vaccines have reduced mortality everywhere. What do you mean not ready for prime time? You douchebag.
Vandenbush.
I already did like the abusive dad thing, but now imagine you're in some country and you're being invaded, like by Nazis, let's say, and you're like, hey, oh, these we got these World War I rifle, but they're a little outdated. They're not ready for prime time. We're just gonna sit here and see what happens. And this is effectively what he's proposing. Between him and Vandenbush. I would rather be treated for COVID by a shaman with schizophrenia than by Vandenbush and Bret Weinstein, these two clowns. How many millions of people have to die? How many old people have to die, before Bret Weinstein and the veterinarian come up with some better vaccine?
And they have failed to produce lasting immunity. They have produced very narrow immunity. It does not compare to the natural immunity that people get from having had and beaten the disease.
So according to my science Googling, Brett is lying. He's a liar. And it actually does compare between the getting a shot and surviving COVID. But let's say that this is true. Let's just give it to the chipmunk and say that this is true. What an asinine, stupid argument. It's like, hey, there's a deadly virus. It's killing millions of people. But did you know that actually if you survive it, you have better immunity?
And what's more, we have learned an awful lot about how the disease can be managed so it's much less lethal, right? That combination suggests that we need a rethinking of our approach. And, it is impossible to prove.
If you have a scientific thesis about this pandemic that's happening, you have to show it in numbers, right? It's so easy to show everything in numbers now because they're in the millions and you have so many different countries with different vaccination rates. So whatever little thesis comes out of your granola, whatever little chipmunk thesis that you're storing in your cheeks, it has to be shown in numbers, baby. Douche. Show me some numbers about anything that you're saying. The one dumb thing that I have consistently seen with COVID is people wearing masks outside. In order for you to catch COVID outside, a person would need to get so close to you and then like sneeze in your face. You would need to start French kissing and then they would fucking sneeze in your face and then you would get COVID. Otherwise, it's utterly pointless to wear masks outdoors, and I do find it consistently goofy.
But based on what people who have successfully treated the disease and have successfully predicted events like the proliferation of variants are telling us, it does seem that we now have the tools at our disposal to manage this crisis and do away with it, which I don't know why we don't do that, but it is at least worth noting that were we to successfully manage it, it would interrupt a huge flow of revenue into this brand new pharma market. Is that the reason that we don't do it? I don't know.
Okay, here are the choices. Choice number one is that Brett doesn't know that every pandemic is a pandemic of variants. He doesn't know that viruses replicate all the time, mutations happen, and new strains emerge. He might not know this as a biologist. That's kind of option one. Option two is that he's lying. He knows that every pandemic is a pandemic of variants. He knows that everybody has predicted that this is going to be a pandemic of variants. And he's lying to make this Belgian moron Vandenbush look like a genius, and himself by extension. So these are the two options. Now, the other thing is, of course, that this is a conspiracy by drug manufacturers. So countries are buying billions worth of this stuff. And if it didn't work, wouldn't one of them say, hey, look, we have higher vaccination rates, and yet we have the same level of deaths as in another country that's not vaccinated? Wouldn't that happen at least once out of all the countries? It just would happen once.
But we, the public, need to recognize our interests are not being served by the public health apparatus. It is making errors that it doesn't need to make, and that has implications for all of our individual health and our collective well-being that require a rethink.
As an alternative to the whole strangling conspiracy that's going on, Brett has a few solutions. One is, of course, that ivermectin that has only been shown to kill COVID when put in a petri dish with toxic levels of ivermectin, levels that would kill us. So basically, if you put some COVID into human poison, it works. It's gonna kill you. And if you take the right amount of ivermectin, you're gonna die, and so will the virus. 2 for 2, baby. 2 for 2. And the second solution is, of course, vitamins. Man, do we all love vitamins because they're natural. There could be no consequences. So, for example, there was a U.S. study of 18,000 male and female smokers to see if some supplements, are gonna make the issues get away. Unfortunately, they had to stop the study. People who were taking these vitamins had a 28% higher risk of lung cancer and a 17% higher risk death from all causes compared with smokers who took a placebo. So, you can't say they don't work. Then, of course, there are antioxidants. In fact, there was a study with 64,157 people. It was they combined the studies and broke down the statistics, and that was on antioxidants. And it turns out they increase mortality significantly with a comparative risk increase of 4%. I don't know what Brett is selling. I think zinc is on there. They actually interfere with all kinds of medication. And in all likelihood, especially people who take mega doses of these vitamins, there are probably thousands of people who are dead today because of them. But Brett is going to pump them to you in ivermectin to deal with this thing. He got it. I don't know what Brett's vitamins are. I'm too lazy to look up all the mortality studies, potential mortality studies. But maybe Brett got it. Maybe the veterinarian
Vandenbush.
And the veterinarian comes very handy, since we're talking now like horse dewormer. And here's my ultimate point about all of this: people don't want to take vaccine They have a sense of distrust. They have a sense of possibility of danger. And I'm all fine with that. I am against vaccine mandates. But on the other hand, this doesn't magically elevate different kind of pseudoscience into science. Ultimately, like something like this, like the ASMR whispers, COVID whispers of Brett and his wife on his dark taint horse podcast, ultimately what it plugs into people is this sense of insight. Everybody out there, they have bought the party line. Everybody out there, you kind of get the douche chills because they bought the party line. But here with Whispering Brett and his wife, you can both be annoyingly preoccupied with COVID and also have your own kind of pseudoscience. You know, we're going to pop some vitamins. Hopefully it's not going to be folic acid, because that's another one that causes cancer. Yeah, we're just going to pop that stuff. If something happens, we're going for the ivermectin.
Vandenbush.
I think one of the reasons everybody's pontificating like this, and, you know, you could have your own crazy theories and feel nonchalant about it, is because people who are dying are vulnerable and old. In this current society, ageism is a real thing. Outside of politics, old people just become pretty irrelevant. And often they just shipped off somewhere, and there they get COVID and die. So that's why we don't have a lot of celebrities who died. Like, remember when Steve Jobs died? Imagine if Steve Jobs has died of COVID. Like, it would be huge. COVID would be huge. And Brett would watch his fucking mouth talking about this shit if Steve Jobs died. Because, man, did we love Steve Jobs. I didn't. My friends, should I ramble on anymore? No, I think not. I think I said what I wanted to say. If folks don't want to take a vaccine that doesn't magically release some butterflies of alternative truth, if you just say, I distrust the vaccine, you know. But if suddenly ivermectin and different medicines, different vitamins start floating out of this Pandora's douche box, then let's keep it closed, my friends. Let's just not take the virus, the vaccine, for our own reasons, for our own reasons of the heart, rather than making up science. Thank you for watching.
Recent favorability ratings show that Americans are not very enthusiastic about either Biden or Trump as the 2020 nominees. And a new proposal by Dr. Bret Weinstein argues that America needs is a unity 2020 ticket. The idea is to have a center-left and a center-right candidate run as a team with the top of the ticket status determined by a coin flip.
Vandenbush.
The top of the ticket status determined by a coin flip.
Vandenbush.
Determined by a coin flip.
Vandenbush.